The Rebel Capitalist Show.
I've been doing a lot of research on the origins of the World Economic Forum.
Oh, Jesus Christ! Yeah,
and I know that I didn't really know how the group was, but after doing some research over the last couple of weeks, I came across the Club of Rome, which is not fake. It's not conspiracy. I mean, they've got a YouTube channel, for heaven's sakes.
I think those guys were sincere, right?
I don't know. I mean, they were set
you're
up
not sure.
in
Okay.
1968, and one of their founding members, oddly enough, was Pierre Trudeau.
Really? That just changed the plot. Holy! And for those who don't know, Pierre Trudeau was a Mao fan before it was cool.
Yeah,
right. He was a Mao fan when Mao had not come out to the West, and he was a big fan of Castro. And I am a believer of the Castro love child Justin Trudeau theory. I've looked at the pictures and I'm going, man, that sure looks like Justin.
Yeah, he looks a lot more like Castro than he does Pierre.
And there's this one photo of Margaret Trudeau while Castro's cutting a cake, and Margaret Trudeau's smiling. She's got this girlish smile, right? This is not just a nice person. She looks like she's dreamy-eyed looking. And she's got her hand right here on Castro's chest. Now, you and I both know that if some chick's got her hand on your chest, you're gonna get laid. Right? That's inside the personal space, right? That's too close. That's the come and get me symbol right there, right? If she has her hand on his back, it's a maybe. Once you're heading to the chest, you're going, oh man, that chick that's a signal. Everyone knows that.
All right. So now getting back to the Club of Rome.
But the Trudeau connection with Club of Rome is entertaining. That's
but for the viewers and who don't know about the Club of Rome, they came to prominence in 1972 when they came out with a paper called Limits to Growth. Right. And basically, this was kind of just a repackaged Malthusian idea that we need to reduce consumption and we need to reduce population growth. That's really what it boils down to.
ZPG. We grew up with ZPG.
We've got limited resources, and if we have exponential population growth, if we have economic growth grow at the same rate, then that's going to deplete the resources, and then humanity, we're done. So, and they started talking about climate change way back then. I think the young people think that this is a phenomenon of the last decade or so. Not true. They were talking about this in the early 70s. And the Club of Rome also came out in 1991, interestingly enough, and said that you have to, in order to affect change, number one, it can't be done at an individual basis. It can't be done at a city level, state level, a country level. It's got to be done by a global government or a global controlling body, really. And then another thing that they were referencing in this 1991 paper is that you have to have a common enemy, and therefore to affect change. And they said, what we want to do is set up a common enemy of pollution, of climate change, and
ozone layer.
You're going to help us create or achieve our goals. And going back to their 1972 goals, that's just to reduce consumption and to reduce the population growth. And so you understand that they influenced, I think, a lot of the people at the World Economic Forum, who then influenced a lot of the politicians, going back to this kind of, who are they type of question.
Right.
And I think that now they still have those same views, and the climate change agenda is just kind of a Trojan horse, where they really don't care about the temperature of the ocean increasing by 2 degrees. Their main objective is to decrease population growth and decrease consumption.
I totally agree with that.
Russia, Ukraine through that lens and spiking energy prices, and going back to what you're saying about the supply chain disruptions in energy, kind of being coincidental there, and you foreseeing this back a year ago, what's the best way to reduce consumption? and therefore economic growth and the standard of living, by the way, especially for the poor and middle class, that's to have extremely high energy prices. So do you have any, I know I just kind of threw that on you.
Let me add a dimension to it. Let me add a dimension to it. I agree with all that. I, by the way, am a Club of Rome kind of guy. I do believe that the sphere is a finite sphere. And it might be that my thing, I read all the peak oil books, all the Matt Simmons, all those guys. I read them all. We do have finite natural gas. We do have finite oil. And you say, well, but we still have tons. I go, well, then why are we drilling 2 miles under the ocean? Why are we fracking? It's not that easy to get. So I think we're going after the tough stuff.
A lot like Marx is that I actually agree with him on a lot of the problems. It's just I completely disagree on
the solution.
The solutions, yeah.
I agree. So here's my current working hypothesis that gives the World Economic Forum some credit. And that gets back to them getting something but doing it maybe wrong. And that is, imagine you're a Davos guy. Let's just use that as a metaphor. If you're a Davos guy, and let's say you've got the best information money can buy, and you're looking at the world and you're seeing India rising, China rising, the US still gluttonous, Europe still gluttonous, and you go, we don't have the lithium, we don't have the cobalt, we don't have the phosphates, we don't have the energy for the fertilizer, we don't have the fossil fuel, we don't have any of that stuff for more than a projectable distance. Now, let me tell you a little story. I read the climate change guy said, Exxon knew there was climate change. Big scandal. Here's a report. The inside report from Exxon knew there was climate change. I read the report. It was Exxon just asking the question, what is the literature on climate change? They wrote this beautiful internal review of the published literature. And they went through all the different arguments. This was in '84. There was nothing secretive in there. There was no gut spilling moment, with one exception. The report concluded that it was unlikely that CO2 would become a problem before we ran out of oil. And it's the first time I've ever seen anything come out of a big cap energy company saying we could run out of oil. Now you have Beyond Petroleum for British Petroleum, which came about just as they filled the Gulf of Mexico with oil and things like that. So I think it's possible the Club of Rome said we can't do it with fossil fuels. We just can't do it. So what's the solution? We went from fire to peat bogs to coal to oil to natural gas. It's nuclear. It has to be nuclear. We know that you could power the world with nuclear for a very long time. We know this. The modern era nuclear plants, I'm told by a guy who's a nuke jock. He's on Twitter. I give you his Twitter feed. And he said the modern day nuclear plants are so efficient, unlike the old ones where you refine it and then use about 6% of the energy there, and then the rest you just can't use. I don't know why you can't re-refine it. That's mysterious to me. He said you can take it right down to drinkable. He says you can get all of it out. So he said the big risk is that people who sell uranium aren't going to be heated because we have so much spent fuel that we can tap. So it's an interesting subplot. But here's the deal. If you realize you got to go to nuclear, but you also know that the average person who you've been indoctrinating steadily for the last decades is going to say, no way should we go nuclear, not in my backyard. The whole political nightmare, what do? You set up an energy crisis, just like a pandemic crisis, and you get the average Joe to say, just give me a vaccine and give me nuclear energy. Bag us for it. Bag us for it. And the way you do that is you have a real bad period where the fossil fuels let us down. By the way, Gates, and I think it was Buffett or Bezos or one of those guys, said they were going to build 2 nuke plants in the next 7 years. Got a little bit of press, not a lot. Apparently, we're building a couple in the US kind of quietly, these smaller ones. And so the gist is I think we're going to nuclear, and a crisis would be the way to get everyone to just say, nuke. Now, we get it. Give us the nukes. It's a lot easier than, one vote at a time, right? Scare the crap out of them. Well, I wrote this last year. I'm on record on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that was as benign. I wish their plan.
That's the benign view, yeah.
Yeah, you know where I'm going with that, because that wouldn't be that bad. I'm in favor of nuclear. I think that is a good option, And I see that being a potential solution. So if they are trying to, push us in that direction covertly, I think that would be the best case scenario.
I think that's right. That paints them as it's called paternalistic libertarianism. That's where they guide you. They guide you.
Yeah. Then you try to figure out, okay, so we've got the consumption, the energy. How do they pull the reduced population growth lever?
Well, and that's where it gets kind of weird, because as soon as you start talking about that, you end up talking like a nut. But, if you go to listen to Bill Gates' TED Talks, he's probably got a couple, so you might have to listen to 2 or 3. But in one of them, he says, amazingly, I just talked about this in the podcast before your podcast. Bill Gates seems to have this interesting problem where he seems to occasionally blurt out the truth when it just doesn't make sense. So like when his wife was beating the crap out of him, and so Epstein's story started surfacing, which I think was just ugly divorce thing. And someone asked about his relationship with Epstein, which apparently is pretty profound. I wasn't ready to endorse that. The New York Times beat the crap out of him. And they asked about his relationship to Epstein, and his answer was, well, he's dead, so you have to be careful. And I'm going, Bill, you might want to rethink that answer, right? That wasn't the one that I would have given. He, in this TED Talk, said in a single sentence, with good vaccines, I think we can reduce the world's population 15%. I'm going, Bill, my understanding of vaccines is it will increase the world's population, unless you know something I don't know, right? So I think, and by the way, we also know Bill was savage, right? There's no one who's been near Silicon Valley, I think, who would say Bill wasn't a savage competitor, right? Real ruthless. And I don't mean that pejoratively. Well, at some level I do, but it's also, that's what created Microsoft, right? And when did he become a good guy? I mean, what date did that happen?
Yeah, it's like people believing the media right now about Russia, Ukraine, when look what they did to us during the COVID.
Or the Gulf War, or right.
It's like the same group of people here.
Yeah, I know. I don't think you can find a war since the turn of the century that doesn't have a dark subplot to how we got into it. I don't think there's a single war that, and you say, well, what about the Gulf War? The rumor behind the Gulf War is that we gave the nod to Saddam and said, look, if you go into Kuwait, it's not our problem. And then he went in, it's like, got him. We got him.